but the most famous pharaoh all but vanished. Cleopatra, the face that launched 1,000 legends. Her story begins in Alexandria, a city at the mouth of the Nile River on the Mediterranean coast. It was founded in 332 BC by Alexander the Great, who conquered Egypt for his ever-expanding empire. After Alexander's death, the city fell into the hands of his general Ptolemy I, who established Greek control over Egypt. Within 100 years, Alexandria was the most famous city in the world, a glorious cultural and learning center which attracted the finest scholars and artists of the time. It grew rich as a trading port between Europe and Asia. Ships from India and Rome sought out its fabled lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Greek occupation of Alexandria and the rest of Egypt lasted for some 300 years, until Cleopatra's time. Queen Cleopatra VII, an Egyptian pharaoh and a full-blooded Greek, she remains one of history's great enigmas. Popular among the Egyptians, Cleopatra was the first Greek ruler to learn their language. She kept the powerful Roman Empire at bay by forging intimate alliances with its leaders. But her luck ran out when Octavius, the ruler of Western Rome, decided to take Egypt from her grasp. Rather than submit to defeat, the queen committed suicide. For all the drama that Cleopatra endured, there's not a trace of it left in present-day Alexandria. Instead, her world lies hidden in 10 meters of murky water in a bay that spreads over 2 square kilometers. No one has ever attempted a full search of this enormous site until now.
Since very long time, I had a dream to come to this place because of the mystery of this site.
4 centuries after Cleopatra's death, earthquakes and the huge tidal wave toppled the palaces on the harbor front. Scattering them into the bay, creating a massive underwater jigsaw puzzle. If anything remains of Cleopatra's palace, it would be found somewhere in the vast, featureless bay. Two to 10 meters deep, the bay is over 2 square kilometers. Godio needs a starting point for his treasure hunt. His only guide is a faint voice from antiquity. A Greek scribe who journeyed to Alexandria 3 years after Cleopatra's downfall and chronicled the wonders that he saw. His name was Strabo, and he described the sprawling walled city with a great lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
We know from Strabo that all around this harbor there were palaces and temples. Among them there was also an island with the palace of Cleopatra and a small harbor belonging to the king.
Many maps have been made based on Strabo's writings, but only underwater exploration can provide the missing details. Visibility is a problem. Divers can rarely see more than 2 meters through the murky waters, and the slightest storm churns up centuries of silt. To locate the palace, Goggio's team uses a variety of sensors to detect the shape of the seafloor below. By chipping away at that crust, the divers expose pieces of the ancient city's wealth and grandeur. A statue of the Greek god Hermes. A coiled serpent, guardian of the city. A sacred bird of Egypt. The head of a Roman empress.
In 1997 and 8, after archaeological excavation, we were able to precisely define the contour and location of the ruined city.
Goggio's team uses red buoys to make an outline of the sunken discoveries. Following Strabo's clues, Goggio is now finally able to bring a lost world into view. His map offers entry into the Queen's domain. A palace where Cleopatra seduced Julius Caesar, mighty commander of the Roman legions. The waterfront where her companion, Mark Antony, built a private sanctuary just months before he took his own life. And finally, Antirodos, Cleopatra's royal island.
I never thought one day I will be able to map the whole of the royal quarters. Now we know we are just at the beginning of a great scientific adventure.
For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, Queen Cleopatra's royal palaces may receive new visitors. Having mapped the ancient port of Alexandria, Goggio narrows his search to the sunken island of Antirodos.
Mohammed and Mustafa, you could go and clean the hieroglyph.
It was here, in 26 BC, that the geographer Strabo saw Cleopatra's luxurious summer home 4 years after her death. But he provides no clue to where the palace stood. By the time Cleopatra assumed the throne, Antirodos was a thriving royal port, prime real estate for the palace of an ambitious beauty and her famous lovers. Elated by the discovery of the ancient docks, Goggio looks for traces of buildings from Cleopatra's reign. Across the harbor, divers have uncovered dozens of distinctly Greek columns. Cleopatra's ancestors came from Greece, and they imported their style to Egypt. Sharp edges resemble columns found in Athens, but carved in native Egyptian granite. Stones that were placed at the top of the columns are decorated with traditional Egyptian symbols. May have formed elegant colonnades, sheltering the queen and her entourage as they boarded their royal vessels. Anchored above Cleopatra's sunken island, Gaudio is following a trail described only by the ancient geographer Strabo in 27 BC. Gaudio knows there was a palace on Antirodos Island. From here, the royal family could have looked out across the bustling harbor toward the great lighthouse. Gaudio's divers have chipped away at encrusted ruins at the southwest corner of the sunken island. Now, their labor pays off. The divers discover a series of giant columns cut from red Egyptian granite.
On the southwest tip of Antirodos Island, we found an accumulation of red granite columns fallen into the port. We counted 60 pieces. They are huge, over 4 feet in diameter.
The ruptured columns cover 60 meters of the bay floor. Shattered pottery beneath them suggests they fell during an earthquake centuries after Cleopatra's death. Paintings from the ancient world indicate that the columns might have acted as a ceremonial gateway to the island. Might have acted as a ceremonial gateway to the island. The columns announce the majesty of their owner. Some were more than 7 meters tall. A magnificent entrance fit for a queen. Approaching sailors would have marveled at this grand entrance to the royal island. The next discovery convinces the team that they are on the right path. Vast expanses of limestone pavement fit for a queen. 550 square meters all over the island, forming a series of grand esplanades. Still more toppled columns are found. Columns that seem to form an ancient colonnade leading presumably to the palace. Classical art offers hints of the palace's appearance. Tall Greek columns erected in Egyptian soil. Billowing canopies providing shade for royalty. But what did the palace really look like? Based on the foundations, experts can now hazard a guess. Inside these walls, ivory clothed the entrance hall, and Indian tortoiseshell was inlaid upon the doors. The palace was adorned with many an emerald. Jewels glittered on the couches. It was here, 2,000 years ago, that the queen of a once great nation tried to save her people from conquest. Cleopatra's love affairs with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony have become enduring legends. Two great warriors entranced by her royal beauty and dazzled by the wealth of her dynasty. Gaudio has found the main building of Cleopatra's palace complex, but he knows that his search of the island is not over. His divers have discovered something unusual nearby, something that would take everyone by surprise. Having found the sunken island where Cleopatra ruled as queen, Frank Gaudio is looking for one more building. belonging to Cleopatra, her own personal temple. Divers have spent 2 years searching for it. Gaudio is convinced it's still there.
For the Egyptians, what mattered was the life after death. Only the temples were built to last to eternity, not the palaces.
One temple, hundreds of kilometers to the south, still heralds Cleopatra's immortality. Here, her image merges with the goddess Isis. Isis controlled the power of fertility. Women begged her blessings for their children. She controlled the annual flood of the Nile that was essential for a successful harvest. For millions of worshippers in Egypt and throughout the Roman Empire, Cleopatra was Isis. In religious processions, Queen Cleopatra dressed as the goddess herself. In religious processions, Queen Cleopatra dressed as the goddess herself. What was left then of her personal shrine? Divers search an area of the sunken island near its shore. A perplexing statue is found, but its identity is not immediately clear. It will head to the surface for further inspection. To raise the statue, Gaudio and engineer Jean-Jacques Groussard prepare a slow and careful hoist to prevent the statue from being smashed to pieces on the jagged paving stones below. Gaudio is joined by Ibrahim Darwish, Egyptian director of the Department of Underwater Archaeology, and archaeologist Emily Tita.
The most likely thing, it's from a small sanctuary of the god, and this would be the major focus within the temple.
Yeah, the most probable thing is a priest, great priest, bearing canopus. Here it's a masterpiece.
It is a high priest of Cleopatra's cult of Isis. He holds a jar called the canopus, filled with holy water from the sacred Nile. It is a priceless discovery, the first complete canopus statue ever found in Egypt. The figure's bald head identifies him as a priest of the Isis cult. His entire body shaven for purity every 3 days, in preparation to pray to the goddess, to ensure the fertility of the Nile. But something even more spectacular waits in the water. 2 perfect sphinxes. Sphinxes are creatures of myth, but their faces bear the likeness of Egypt's kings and queens, perhaps even Cleopatra herself. Frank Godiot orders both sphinxes to be lifted aboard so that full casts can be made. For 2,000 years, the sphinxes have been hidden from human sight. Now, for a few agonizing minutes, they spiral towards the sky.
You have to wait. What remains is a face. You know, the preservation of the face. It has not been armored.
Yeah.
It has been destroyed by nature.
There's no inscription, unfortunately, but stylistically, this would be fairly easy to date because of the roundness of the face, the shoulder patches. Very nice.
For the divers, after months of searching in the muddy darkness, it is a moment of joy. Each sphinx is prepared for a silicone molding. Petroleum jelly is applied to lubricate the surface. Life-size casts will be sent to classical scholars to help solve the riddle of the Sphinx.
When I am excavating on Antirodos Island, I have the chance to bring new information to light, such as the Sphinx bearing her father's likeness.
During Cleopatra's reign, sphinxes were often used as spiritual guardians for temples. The discovery of the sphinxes so close to the Canopus priest suggests to Godiot that he has found the shrine he was looking for.
These were lying on a beautifully paved area near the red granite columns. This layout most probably shows that this was a small sanctuary of Isis close to the palace.
2,000 years ago, it would have been enclosed in sacred gardens instead of the sea. As the goddess Isis transformed into human flesh, Cleopatra would have led processions here, holy rituals blessed by the Isis priests, purified by sacred Nile waters from the Canopus jars. In the final hours of the expedition, there is one last treasure that must be resurrected from Cleopatra's harbor. It is a giant stone head. The complete statue must have stood at least 5 meters tall. But what man deserved such a memorial? There is only one way to be certain. Bring it to the surface for study. Godiot immediately recognizes the face. It is the Roman dictator Octavius, Cleopatra's mortal foe. As his mighty army invades Alexandria, Cleopatra chooses suicide over surrender. She is Egypt's last queen, and now a mighty Roman claims her realm. After 2,000 years, Frank Godiot has touched her world. As they prepare to sail home, Godio's team has one last task. They must return all of Cleopatra's treasures back to the bay. Ultimately, the Egyptian government will determine their fate.
Ten years ago, I decided to undertake this important project, trying to find some remains of the submerged city of Alexandria.
What he has found opens a new chapter in Egyptian archaeology and casts new light on a legendary queen the world cannot forget.